Francisco Goya has often been described as the last of the great old masters and the first of the new. He painted sublime portraits of the Spanish royal court and celebratory pictures of the good life in Spain. But he also produced some of the most harrowing images of human cruelty ever created. His work is a compelling mixture of public documentation and private nightmare. It can also make the stomach churn in its uncompromising bleakness and power. Not much is known of Goya's early life as a painter, but he seems to have followed a fairly conventional path. The son of a master gilder, Goya was born on the 30th of March 1746 in Fuendentodos, a small provincial village in central Spain. He began his artistic studies at the age of 13 with the local artist José Luzán in nearby Zaragoza. In time-honoured fashion, he travelled to Italy in 1770 to acquaint himself with the old masters and classical antiquity. And on his return to Spain, he got his first commission to paint a vault in the El Pilar Cathedral in Zaragoza. Adoration of the Name of God, painted in 1772 when Goya was just 26, is clearly influenced by the Baroque style he'd seen on his travels, with angels supported by billowing clouds surrounding the name of God, here written in a triangle to symbolise the Trinity, in Hebrew. In 1773, at the age of 27, Goya married Josefa Bayeu, sister of Francisco Bayeu, then a rising star at the Spanish royal court, and who was to help Goya in the coming years. But Goya's marriage was plagued with tragedy. Of the 8 children that he had, only one, Javier, would survive into adulthood. Professionally, though, Goya's horizons were about to expand. At the beginning of 1775, with Goya approaching his 29th birthday, he came to the city that would define him as an artist, Madrid. The city was undergoing a transformation under King Charles III. Many artists were attracted to the city, and with the extensive building and city planning in progress, Madrid was fast becoming a picturesque city of international stature. Within a year of arriving in Madrid, Goya produced a series of paintings, of which this is among the most celebrated. It's called The Picnic, and it shows an idyllic scene on the banks of the river Manzanares, just outside Madrid, where a group of characters are indulging in an afternoon's frolicking. And it also shows 2 social types, mayos and mayas. They're from the lower classes, they're artisans, sometimes they're on the verge of criminality, but they're free spirits. As you can see, flagons of wine have been consumed, they've eaten, and then they're lounging around in the sun, flirting as pudding arrives in the form of this figure, the orange seller, who shows her wares, but at the same time flirts and gestures off into the distance as if to say to one of the men, "Come with me if you want." But the whole purpose of this painting isn't just an idyllic celebration, nor is it to show Goya's amazing facility as a young artist. This painting had another purpose. In fact, it was a cartoon or a study for a tapestry. In the 18th century, the tapestry was immensely prized by Spanish aristocrats, who not only used it for decoration, but looked to it as denoting social status and wealth. Goya got the job at the Royal Tapestry Manufactory on the recommendation of his brother-in-law, Francisco Bayeu. Here, Goya and other artists produced the designs that would be copied onto the manufactory looms. The images tended to be portraits of country life, of sport and other innocent rustic pursuits. But it wasn't long before Goya started to introduce an edgier note into his work. In this picture, called The Blind Guitarist, the grotesquely painted figure of the musician begins to play in front of a group of well-to-do folk out for their stroll. In contrast to the shadowy figure of the musician, a man in a dazzling yellow coat reaches into his pocket for a coin with which to fob off the busker. But he can't be so easily brushed aside, and nor will he disappear from Goya's future work, where there develops a contrast of light and dark, of the frivolous and the more sinister side of human life. But there's also a growing ambition and scale in Goya's work, evident in this tapestry design created in 1788. It's called the Meadow of San Isidro and shows the city of Madrid celebrating the feast of its patron saint. Goya described the work as his most arduous challenge to date, a painting of some 7.5 meters in length, showing feasting, frolicking figures on the banks of the Manzanares River, with the city visible in the distance. The design, though, never made it into a tapestry, due to the death of the king, for whose palace it was intended. Instead, it was bought by the Duke and Duchess of Osuna. With his election to the Royal Academy in Madrid in 1880, Goya was able to find the support of aristocrats such as these. And this portrait of the Osuna family, painted in 1789, is typical of the many that Goya did throughout his career, showing the wealthy patrons in all their finery. Goya had rapidly become the painter of Spanish society, the most sought-after portraitist in the city and beyond. But privately, he was having doubts about his success, fearful of the fact that he may have been merely selling out to the market. And then, in 1792, whilst travelling to Andalusia to visit friends, Goya became seriously ill. The exact nature of his illness isn't known, but it lasted several months and left him profoundly deaf for the rest of his life. Whilst he was recuperating from his illness, Goya began to work in a much more radical and experimental way. In a series of 14 small paintings made on tin, and which he referred to as his cabinet pictures, Goya wrestled with the unpredictability of human existence, where life can be snuffed out at any moment, and where sanity and reason can easily descend into a pit of madness. But if the cabinet paintings seemed powerful arenas in which Goya's imagination began to run riot, they were nothing in comparison to his first great graphic series, produced through the 1790s and finally published in 1799, 80 images called Los Caprichos. Los Caprichos, or the Caprices, is a kaleidoscope of human delusion and weakness. Here, Goya rips into the world around him, the vanity, pomposity and stupidity of Spanish society. No one would escape from his savagely satirical gaze. Fluctuating between the natural and the unnatural, Goya produced a collection of images, the like of which had never been seen before. Not surprisingly, the public response to Los Caprichos ranged from incomprehension to outrage. And from the first edition of 300, Goya sold less than 60 sets. Later, as an old man, he said he withdrew it from public sale because he feared the Spanish Inquisition. However, the work was to fuel much of the best and darkest work for the rest of his life. Goya still needed to earn a living, though, and returned to painting large-scale portraits. The Duchess of Alba was one of the most compelling women in Spain, and she became Goya's most famous model and his passionate love.